Okay, Alan, you said that it's not all champagne and dining out. So what are the best and worst parts of being a bookmaker's PR?
Look, the best part is that I attended nearly every major race meeting in the country last year with expenses paid, albeit doing a job where you need to work hard. So to be able to attend all of those events is something that I could never have dreamed of when I was younger, and I think that is always brought home to me whenever something significant occurs. For instance, I always remember bunking off school during the Chester May meeting. I was absolutely fascinated with Chester and the way they used to cover it on Channel 4 because it was such a unique course. And I remember that week in May, if it wasn't already off for May holidays, then I would make sure that at least two of them I would pretend to be ill and watch it at home. And I just remember Chester was this sort of fascinating place for me as a race course. And we then, as a company at Betway, sponsored the Chester Cup, and I remember handing over that trophy. And for me, that it might not mean much to other people, but to have been sitting there as a sort of 13, 14-year-old watching that with my dad, and then to be able to present that trophy for that race. Okay, it's not riding in it, it's not training the winner, it's not owning the winner by any means, but just being involved to that extent, I could never have imagined that. And again, to an even bigger extent, last year we've got a major sponsorship with Betway's partnership of the Grand National. In 6 or 7 races at last year's meeting, I'm handing over the trophy. And again, that's something I could not have dreamed of when I sat there in the Easter holidays with my dad watching the racing from Aintree, and I do have to pinch myself at times. So that's definitely the best part. The worst part is, I think we've seen in the last week, some of my counterparts were getting stick on an anonymous account on Twitter earlier in the week because, some shocking stuff. And, these people have got families, they have carved out a career in the game. You do not fluke a career in PR. You do not fluke a career in the trading side of the game. People are found out pretty quickly. Don't get me wrong, there are people that probably have climbed ladders that everyone has turned their nose up at and said, how has he got that job, how has he done that? That happens in every single industry. But there are hard-working people that are working in the PR side, and there are hard-working people behind the scenes, and unfortunately people have been given a platform now to attack these people. I must admit, I don't think I've ever had it that bad compared to some of the stick I've seen flying around. What I'll try and do is if it's an account in a person's own name that's tweeting me a genuine concern about my firm, whether the firm's right or the punter's right, I'll definitely try and resolve that, whether that be privately by taking the person's number and giving them a call, or a direct message, or if it's a very simple thing, passing it on to customer service. What I can't abide is people coming on in anonymous accounts and making accusations, because we used to investigate those, or we used to try and get the account usernames of people like that, and I can wholeheartedly say now that 95% of the time these people aren't actually giving the whole story on Twitter, and they're whipping up a storm about companies and about bookmakers without actually giving that key snippet of information that would mean that the bookmaker was well within their rights to ask for an additional piece of ID or something a bit extra from the punter, or have essentially stuck by their rules, and that's why punter A isn't getting their money. But don't get me wrong, bookmakers will sometimes fall foul of their own rules, and I think we had a rule last year that, and I forget the event now, and I forget the sport, but I think we essentially had a rule that didn't quite. It was a good rule in principle within our set of rules when you sign up, but there was a certain thing that happened that I think it was something to do with postponed matches and whether your bet stood. And we took on the feedback of the customers, and I took on the feedback that I was getting on Twitter, And I said, actually, do you know what? You guys are completely right. In this instance, the rule doesn't fit, and we changed our rules and we gave everyone a refund. So sometimes it is worth opening your ears and listening to punters' concerns, because sometimes the rule won't have been put in place maliciously by the company to catch people out. It'll be there and it might not serve the right purpose, and it can be adapted. And we're always open to doing that. And I think most people that have ever got in touch with me, whether the ruling's gone in their favour or our favour, they'll admit that we've at least opened up that dialogue.
Do you think the bookmaking industry shoots itself in the foot more than other industries when it comes to public relations gaffes like that?
Not necessarily. I think we're dealing with a very different kind of PR. I remember when one of my previous companies was taken over, and it meant a lot of us were losing our jobs. I do remember going for a drink with the traders that afternoon and them all saying, well, you'll be all right, you're in PR, that transfers to all different industries. And I actually sort of really disagree with that. I must say that the bookmaker PR is completely different. I think bookmakers are the only industry that I can think of that actually compete with their customers. The customer can win off you, you can win off the customer. It's an ongoing two-way relationship, whereas if you're a PR person for a car company, the car is the product, people buy the car, people drive the car. You're not in competition with those people. You're not trying to, the punter's not trying to, the customer's not trying to beat the company when they're buying a car off them. And that competition between punter and bookmaker means that the PR role for a bookmaker is completely different to anywhere else. So I would say that it's a very different role that's not transferable.
So ultimately in your job, you're trying to get more punters to bet on you. So are you best served looking for loads of fiver and tenner punters, or are you looking for a whale, a big punter, high staking? What would be your ultimate aim?
I think that question probably would be more aimed to our advertising side, because I think they're the ones that have a direct impact on who a company's trying to actually get through the door. I think my remit is to get enough exposure for Betway that people recognise the brand when they're seeing adverts, and when they're actually making their choice as to which bookmaker to use. Ours is front of mind because of all the PR stuff that we've done, keeping our name in the press for the right reasons. So where that actually ends up in the cycle of whether the punter is a £5 punter, leisure punter, or a big hitter, is I think is enough far removed from PR that we don't need to worry about it.
So with that in mind, what's the best and worst things you've seen done to promote a bookmaker? It doesn't have to be one you've been involved with.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are critical of the banter side of social media that a lot of bookmakers have now picked up on, whether it be criticising teams and say, you know, even us at Betway, even trying to make a particularly nuanced statement about a substitution foul of that, with the team getting annoyed, but some that are just generally there for the, I suppose no better word for it than the banter side of either football supporting or other sports. I think sometimes I cringe at that. I think a lot of adverts in the industry are cringeworthy. I mean, I've worked at a company that had probably one of the worst ones. I think Blue Square had one of the worst adverts I've ever seen. They had feedback from customers saying that the site was incredibly easy to use, and that was the major selling point of the company. But what the marketing people at that company failed to realise at the time is, if you're speaking to people that use your site day in, day out, they're obviously going to say it's easy to use, but a whole hook was put around getting straight to the bet, and I think they called it getting straight to the Blue Square bet, which is a sentence that doesn't even make sense, and they had a whole range of adverts based on that, and a few of those people are still out there, and I'd say that was a particularly cringeworthy advert. But look, I mean, I've seen adverts even now for some of our competitors that use wording that doesn't particularly make sense, and I think they could be a lot better. But I think it's like everything, you pay a lot of attention to the kind of adverts and news within your own industry, and then you maybe don't see it when it's in other industries. So I think we might be in a bit of a bubble where we pay more attention to adverts and statements and things that go on in our industry, where a lot of people wouldn't even come across their radar that an advert is particularly different from any other advert in the industry.
Well, one thing we've seen in the bookmaking industry is it's changing rapidly, year on year, month on month, with social media, internet betting, etc. How do you see the betting industry and bookmaking landscape in 5 to 10 years' time?
It's a really hard one because the advances will go across loads of different sections of the industry. So one will be technology, and I'm quite freely admit that probably is one of the channels that I wouldn't be particularly expert in. So I wouldn't be able to tell you which new technological advances are going to happen over the next 5-10 years in the industry. On my side, I think content is king. The videos that we're recording now, I mean, I'm a huge fan of these videos and the way that they are used to promote a bookmaker, and I think a lot of people really enjoy watching them. Maybe not this one, but let's hope so. And I think in my company Betway, we try and give a slightly different spin to the content. I don't think we're particularly involved in the banter side. We try and inform and educate. We do a few fun videos whenever we got the assets, like West Ham players. We did a nice little video with Jack Wilshere last week where we pranked him with a couple of the other players, interviewing him through a journalist that was a plant in the room, and that got great numbers on social media, and it got a lot of impact for the company. And in a way, that's PR, but that's content PR. So I think that is quite a heavy avenue to invest in, especially if any legislation comes in that prevents advertising as we know it, because content will then be king, and you'll have to be very good at that. And I think we are, and I think these videos are.